If you think tort law isn't interesting, you haven't seen Erin Brockovich. In the movie, a tough-nosed legal assistant with a penchant for curse words and miniskirts organizes plaintiffs and finds damning information against utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric. The client's claims arose out of PG&E's dumping of over 350 million gallons of chromium-tainted water in local reservoirs, which they believe to be the cause of their cancers.
Well, get this, they had a seminar. They invited about 200 residents from the area, had it at the plant in this warehouse, telling them all about Chromium-3 and how good it is for you, when all the time they're using Chromium-6.
Brockovich's efforts played a critical role in securing the largest settlement at the time, $333 million. The movie ends with the plaintiffs receiving sizable checks to cover their medical costs and any future costs for their children and grandchildren. But the long-term effects of the settlement are much more complex than what the movie magic suggests.
We all assume $333 million later, that was that.
I really felt that there was a victory and that we had made a difference. And to be here today and see that happening again, I can't sit here and tell you there's been a victory. There hasn't.
We were shocked to discover all these years later it never got fixed. In fact, the area of the contamination has grown, according to the local water board.
Nearly 20 years after the lawsuit, the town of Hinkley, California is a shell of what it used to be.
It's a ghost town.
Yeah.
After a few more settlements and years of remediation work to scrub the toxic material from the area's water supply, PG&E began supplying bottled water to the town's residents and restarted a land buyout program from 2010 to 2014, when the plume of hexavalent chromium got out of hand and began migrating. Much of the town's tax base has left, and the local elementary school and post office have closed. If hexavalent chromium can destroy a town, should we be worried about it? The Brockovich suit ended in a settlement, so there was no definitive answer from our court system on whether the citizens of Hinkley were actually poisoned by PG&E's dumping of chromium-6.
In the United States, unlike the European Union, chemicals are assumed to pose no health risk unless the EPA proves otherwise. This task is left to a small program within the EPA called the Integrated Risk Information System, or IRIS. Without a finding that chromium-6 is linked to cancer by IRIS, the EPA cannot regulate the substance with its potential carcinogenicity in mind. Under the Safe Water Drinking Act, the EPA can establish a maximum contaminant level for a toxic substance, which is the legal limit allowed in the public water system. An MCL for total chromium was promulgated in 1991. Notably, this MCL was established more than 5 years before the Brockovich lawsuit, and it doesn't take into account the underlying harm that resulted in such a large settlement for the Hinkley plaintiffs, the carcinogenicity of chromium-6 when ingested.
That there is a big cause for concern about drinking hexavalent chromium, whether it be stomach cancer, whether it be liver damage, whether it be toxicity. There's even been studies that shows that it can have reproductive health effects.
Instead, its toxicity is assessed with respect to its ability to cause skin rash. This MCL is still in effect today. In September of 2010, the EPA announced the availability of a draft report reassessing the toxicity of hexavalent chromium. This draft cited studies establishing a link between chromium-6 and cancer when ingested orally, exactly what the defendants in the Brockovich case set out to prove before the company settled. The report was expected to be finalized in 2011, but as of October 2017, it is still on step 1 of 7 of the finalization process. One of the reasons? The EPA quietly reversed itself shortly after the publication of the draft in order to wait for the results of new studies paid for by the American Chemistry Council, the major trade representative and lobbying group for American chemical manufacturers. The best available research that would assess the toxicity of hexavalent chromium would be paid for and conducted by the industry the EPA was supposed to be regulating.
The people in the United States are drinking water that meets the EPA safe drinking water level.
A 2008 report by the Government Accountability Office found that the vast majority of IRIS's toxicity assessments languished and died during the Bush administration. And in 2009, a subcommittee of the House Committee on Science and Technology issued a report asserting that the Bush administration's Office of Management and Budget systematically suppressed environmental science by using the bureaucratic process to slow down toxicity assessments by the EPA's Integrated Risk Information System. The report specifically criticized an OMB employee by the name of Dr. Nancy Beck for interfering with IRIS assessments.
Despite pledges by the Obama administration to speed up the assessments and early indications that it could do so, industry reasserted itself back into the EPA shortly into his first term. From 2009 to 2011, a 2-year period, IRIS finalized 29 assessments of potentially toxic materials. From 2011 to 2017, a 6-year period, it finalized only 19. In May of 2017, Dr. Nancy Beck joined the Trump administration's Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. To do so, she left her job as the Senior Director of Regulatory Science Policy at the American Chemistry Council. One of her first accomplishments on the job, rewriting the EPA's rules to make it harder to track the health consequences of PFOA, a substance you might remember from Rob Billett's fight against DuPont Chemical.
The Environmental Protection Agency has raised some eyebrows with the changes it has made under the Trump administration.
Several states are also challenging an even more troublesome decision Pruitt made to reverse a ban on the use of a pesticide that the EPA's own scientists have said could damage children's brains.
Erin Brockovich is, on its face, a movie about the power of tort law to right the world's wrongs. Watching the movie nearly 20 years later, a bleaker picture emerges. Salient injustice destabilizes our system, so when a powerful entity is the source of this injustice, it will seek to conceal itself through a legitimating third party, process, or story. The dominant story of the past few decades, the dispositionist model, promotes the idea that consumers are driven by preferences and make rational consumption decisions. But unlike consumers in the market for normal products, we don't get to choose the quality of the water we drink. Companies like PG&E cannot conceal their unjust actions by utilizing this choice frame. Instead, they rely on an older trick in their playbook, the creation of doubt and controversy by muddying the scientific waters.
Isn't the scientific jury in?
I don't think so. There's a lot of scientists that are still debating that question.
Large commercial interests tend to be advantaged in the competition to influence our regulators. The ability of the American Chemistry Council to stall IRIS's toxicity assessment of chromium-6 so they could introduce their own science speaks to this power. While tort law might have provided a remedy for the victims of Hinkley, California, it has certainly not led to an appropriate level of regulation of a toxic substance. So the next time you take a sip of water, ask yourself, do you actually know what you're drinking?
By the way, we had that water brought in special for you folks. Came from a well in Hinkley.